Okay, and we are now broadcasting live. I'm here
Wonderful.
at Shambhala Mountain Center. My name is Travis Newville, and I'm with Elysabeth Williamson, who's in sunny but maybe a little bit cloudy today, California. Elizabeth is an ERYT 500 yoga instructor and the founder of Principles Partner Yoga, and she's coming up to Shambhala Mountain Center in the beginning of March to lead a retreat based around Savasana. And so, welcome, Elizabeth, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
So maybe we could begin by going right into Savasana, which is commonly referred to as corpse pose. And maybe a good question is, seems to me like there's more to Savasana than just being a relaxing way to end a yoga session. Is that right?
I didn't hear the second half of the question. There's more to Shavasana than?
There's more to Savasana than it just being a relaxing way to end a yoga session.
Absolutely. But the key word is relaxation. And I think people think of Shavasana as a relaxation pose, but we can take that concept and take it into the different levels of our being and ask the question, first of all, what are we relaxing? And obviously we're relaxing our body, we're relaxing our thoughts, our concepts, our beliefs. But I think we can even think of relaxing at the deepest level. We're relaxing what we really perceive ourselves to be. So who we are at the deepest level starts to relax, and who we are beyond this form starts to, when we relax the form, the formless is more easily coming through. Coming forward.
When I think about what there is to relax, are we relaxing our fears connected with something? And I always think like, well, is there always some underlying fear of death happening with us? And that our other fears are maybe connected to somehow.
Yeah, I think that has been my experience with this exploration, that I think at the root of all of our fear is the fear of death. And the amazing paradox of the exploration is that when we're willing to say, okay, let's talk about it, let's feel it, let's look at it, let's examine not only our own fear of death, but fear of loss of our loved ones. I think that's really side by side, and for a lot of people, a greater fear than even their own death. And the amazing thing that has been my experience with this practice and this exploration is the joy that that comes out of the exploration. That I remember the first year we did it, by the time we actually got to the practice where we act as guardians for each other and go into feeling ourselves letting go, there was so much joy, and it was kind of uncontainable. We were just bubbling over with joy. And, you know, most people don't want to think about or talk about death and dying. And yet, just the willingness to do so, to openly face into it, the result is joy. Isn't that kind of wild?
It's the thing that we're freaked out about most when we turn around and encounter it. Turns out we can become very joyful in doing so.
Yeah, and it's liberating. I mean, I think our nature is joyful. I mean, we experience the full range of emotion, but when we're liberated, we get to experience more joy, and we can have glimpses of this liberation. It doesn't have to be the ultimate liberation to glimpse what our true nature is, and that is one of joy and freedom.
Hmm. So can you describe maybe or contrast maybe a healthy and helpful attitude towards death, both our own death and death of our loved ones, with maybe a less healthy or less helpful attitude or approach?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the main thing we could think of with this is just being willing to be open to our feelings and thoughts and energy around it on any given day. The Tibetan Buddhists, the Shambhala community, I think, are really the most progressive spiritual lineage that I know of that has really used meditation on death as a regular practice. And it doesn't have to be a big, visualization or even retreat. We can just wake up in the morning or go to sleep at night and say, is today or tonight a good day to die, a good night to die? And, the native people obviously did that practice. And to live in moment-to-moment, day-to-day relationship with our death, I think is maybe the most powerful practice we can do. Because, again, it helps us stay really real with with how, this is a limited experience. Yeah, and let's get as much out of it as we can. Let's be as fully alive as we can. And I think that is something that arises in this exploration, that often it's not our fear of death as much as our fear of being fully alive that arises. I know that that's come up for me. And the fear that I'm going to die before I am fully alive. And and it's different all the time. It's a journey to really willingly open our hearts and minds and body to this practice. And that's why doing it in the container of a partner yoga practice, and this practice came directly out of my book, so doing it in a container like that, to have the principles of compassion and trust and surrender and touch and grounding, to have all those layers of support that we need when we're going into unknown territory, which is the mystery of death and dying.
So that's interesting, because death, ultimately it seems like death is going to be a solitary experience.
Yeah.
But somehow in opening up to death, we can support one another in that.
Yes, and that's an interesting paradox and an interesting point, that we come in alone, we die alone, and yet both the coming in and the dying are in relationship to other people. Obviously, when we're being birthed, that's in direct relationship to our mother. But I think the metaphor of birth comes up a lot in the death exploration, and how we're being birthed into another form. And there's different thoughts about what that form is, but or formlessness. But it is it's a transformation of one form into the other. And the woman that is co-facilitating with me, Margie McSweeney, has been a midwife and has encountered that paradox and similarity between the metaphor really of birth and death and how they merge and blend.
Yes, it seems like at least two aspects of our attitude towards death. One being our attitude towards death affects our experience of being alive, and then our attitude towards death affects how we are able to go through that process when it happens.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things that we learn from these great Tibetan teachers. They explain quite clearly. I was very inspired by Sokyo Rinpoche's book, of the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, his revision of that, and just the simplicity of how he speaks of what we would all want most from the person beside us in the dying process is for them to be willing to put themselves unflinchingly in our place and to know that what we all want is to love and be loved, and to feel that, to have that as a real felt sense that we're safe and we're loved. And I think if we feel those things, which we really support each other to feel, then we have a lot more courage, a lot more heart to face the unknown.
So being with one another is not only helpful in like the rehearsal for death, but through the actual process of death, being in the presence of somebody can be a helpful thing. And maybe it could probably be an unhelpful thing too if the person isn't acting in such a spacious and loving way.
So
right?
The person who's dying, you mean?
I mean, if a person is going through death and they're with somebody that's not loving, that's not willing to really be there with them, that's maybe freaking out and clinging, like that could make it more difficult.
Yeah, I think it does, and yet I think the energy of death, as the energy of birth, is more powerful than us. You know, it's this kind of takes over like a wave, and I think that that energy is beyond our conscious control, and so that even if somebody is maybe afraid or whatever, angry, whatever energy might not be in peace, that just being in the presence of the sacred, which is what birth and death are, sacred passages, can be transforming. And it may not even be felt in the moment.
So we might, like, I might die in a really ugly way. You know, like I might get plowed down by a moose when I walk out of my office. We have moose here. Or hit by a bus or whatever if I'm in a city. Is there still potential, you know, in those like accidental ugly deaths, you know, for a sacred and maybe good or auspicious passage?
Yeah, and we don't know. There's more and more studies and more people coming back from those realms speaking of it. Most notably, Eben Alexander. Are you familiar with the book that he wrote, Proof of Heaven?
No.
Well, it's an amazing book, and I highly recommend it. And he was an ideal person to plow through all of the fantasies that, or I shouldn't say fantasies, all the ideas that people have that near-death experiences are just a function of the brain. His brain, he was a neuroscientist and surgeon, and his brain shut down for 7 years, and he wrote about the most in-depth near-death or beyond death experience ever recorded. So there's more and more of these things happening, but we don't know. What we do know is how can we be more fully alive? How can we realize our true natures, why we have this precious gift of a body and a life? And my experience is just even in the opening evening of this practice to sit in a circle and talk about death. I mean, how rare is that? To have the conversation that we're having. We just don't have that many opportunities in life to talk about it openly. And to me, that is just amazing in itself. And then to take the practice from there and see it from different aspects and see how it changes all the time. But it's one of the richest things we can explore because it really helps us get to the heart of why we're here collectively and individually. And if you or I were to die today, would we be at peace? And if not, why? So how would you answer that question, Travis?
If I were to die today, would I die in peace? Yeah, I think so. And I think of, like, when I reflect on that these days, I'm really grateful to be living at Shambhala Mountain Center. It feels like I'm in the place where my heart and whatever spiritual yearnings have been leading me. And so in some small way, I feel like I've done my part and I'm really leaning into my spiritual practice and I'm like trying to do good stuff for people. And so I don't feel much regret. I feel pretty good about things these days. And like if lightning were to strike me when I was like circumambulating the stupa, I think I'd feel good about that death. And I've been fortunate enough to be practicing within the Shambhala tradition, which, as you mentioned, like death comes up and we think about death. This morning, I'm doing these Lojong practices these days, you know, from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And this morning's contemplation was about death, about like how you handle yourself at the time of death is important. And part of that contemplation is spending time with the idea of like strong determination, that like I'm going to maintain some sanity through my death and I'm going to like be there for it, and some aspiration that whatever occurs beyond death, that I may be connected to these sort of heart teachings and this you know, some general way of being a loving whatever I'm going to be. So I feel somewhat connected to it, not that that couldn't be deepened. And so I'm looking forward to you know, being part of this retreat that you're going to be leading.
Wonderful.
To, you know, to deepen that a lot. I think there's always room for that.
Yeah.
So, how's that?
That sounds great. And I think the thing that strikes me about it is the understanding, the two words that struck me is the determination and the compassion, the heart. You know, the determination to stay connected to your heart and to kindness and compassion. I love that the word courage comes from the Latin heart. And how those, you know, we can feel the circle of facing into our fear and finding the heart, or the courage to move through it and you know, come through the other side feeling more liberated and more free and more free to be alive. And then we go through the next experience, the next facing in. but I think compassion is really the key. And when we touch each other and ground into our bodies, so we'll do some really beautiful relaxation practices using touch, using some Thai yoga massage, using alignment techniques that allow us to rest the body deeply. And then when we rest the body, all the other levels can more easily rest.
Mm. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a very rich and beautiful weekend, so I look forward to it. And thank you so much for taking the time today to speak and share your wisdom on this.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure. I'm looking forward to it. I feel it's a real honor to do this. Yeah.
Okay, so that's March 7th to 9th at Shambhala Mountain Center.
In Red Feather Lake, Colorado.
In Red Feather Lakes, Colorado, by the way, on a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful mountain valley.
Yes, so, I feel particularly honored and grateful to do this weekend at the Shambhala Mountain Center because really I couldn't choose a better place in terms of the sacred space and the support for a practice like this.
Wonderful. Well, may some wonderful people come up and touch in with that with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll push the button and then we can say bye. But we'll say bye to to our listeners and viewers now. So thanks once again.
Thank you, Travis.